So looking at some of the results, activities, of course, you know, as all the hands showed here, basically everyone is on Facebook. I think Facebook fan page, as you see here, was 93%. I think the others had a Facebook group. So everyone really is on Facebook. Now, you know, these are some of the tools that were used, but some of the other activities that were mentioned were about 2/3 had placed an ad on a social network, so think of placing an ad on Facebook. The interesting thing that I found as well was that Group 1 orchestras, so orchestras with a bigger budget, used more tools on average. It's something like 5 tools versus 4 tools for the smaller budget orchestras. I think that's very logical. You know, they have bigger budgets, they have bigger staff, so they might have a little bit more time to devote to these tools. I also asked about engagement, and about 20% of the respondents said that they had a specific mailing list for bloggers. About half said that I specifically asked about comments and negative comments. You know, most of them commented on a response on a Facebook wall or a Twitter feed. You know, they respond back. But I also asked about negative responses, which I think is more telling. You know, we can all say, "Oh, thank you very much" for a compliment, but are people responding to negative comments? About half said they did not respond publicly. About a quarter said that they tried to contact the author of the negative comment, and the rest said that they did not respond in any way. So I thought that those were interesting as well. Let's see the response of negative comments. Social media mindset, and I basically gave it a scale of 5. You know, 1 being low importance of social media in marketing strategy, 5 high. The same with attitude towards it. 1 is hostile, and 5 is enthusiastic. I think the interesting point here was that, of course, importance of measuring results was valued highest by those who had a budget for social media. I think that comes as a given. And I also thought it was interesting that Group 1 orchestras seem to have, so the orchestras with the bigger budget seem to have slightly more confidence in their knowledge of social media, and those with budgets for social media were perhaps a little more honest and said that they did not feel as comfortable in their knowledge. One thing I don't have on the slide here, but that I thought was very interesting, was that about 87% said that they had no policy for social media usage in their workplace, so for their employees. Now that's perhaps not surprising, but what I thought was surprising was that about 50% said that they didn't find a need for it. And I think that's very interesting, and perhaps it's this perceived notion of a policy means restricting social media use, Facebook use, Twitter use. So maybe it was in my phrasing, or maybe it was a perceived negative thing. A policy would be perceived as negative. But maybe people just don't see the need for it. Goals and objectives. And here again, I think there's somewhat of a limiting factor in that I had these as options, and I had a blank, fill in the blank if they wanted to add other options. So by predefining their goals and objectives, I might have not gotten the real interest in this. But I think it's noteworthy that they tried to increase web traffic, awareness, and fundraising was really not a big deal. Philanthropic Action, which is a group, did a test, and they interviewed nonprofit managers and fundraising and volunteers for many nonprofits are the most important parts of social media. I think for orchestras, it's slightly different. And what the Philanthropic Action Network found was that most fundraising and volunteer efforts were not effective on social media. Now that is, of course, whether they're not doing it effectively or whether social media is not effective is a whole other question. I saw a hand go up.
Yeah, was there any trends or correlation between the demographics of the ensemble's donors versus general trends nationwide as to who's using social media? That could explain those trends.
I'm not sure.
So were the people who are donating big bucks and the
Mhm.
fundraising activities, are those the same demographics as general trends across the country for who is using social media? Was there any correlation there?
In the Philanthropic Action
Yeah.
study, or not that I'm aware of. I just looked at this general point of most nonprofits
Yeah.
use it for fundraising and volunteer recruiting. But the open-ended questions I received were, some of the goals and objectives were connect to the community and listen and learn. And I think if I had given those options, we might have seen that a little bit more too. But I think the question that comes from here is increasing web traffic. It's a very broad goal, but why do you want to increase your web traffic? I think that's the important question. Do you want to increase web traffic because you want to increase tickets? You want to increase awareness, which was one of the options. Increasing web traffic without saying why you want to do it is it's not a very strategic way of thinking about it. And again, that was probably my limitation to the study as well. Responsibilities. Marketing departments are mostly involved with social media. Probably those who are involved with managing social media at their organizations here in the room are probably marketing department people or communications people. PR and marketing together were very common. Some other options I saw were IT and web together with marketing, or development together with marketing. But mostly PR and marketing, or marketing as the sole manager. But think about all your departments and think about where social media hits. It's really everywhere. Musicians, artistic, they can provide the content. Web and IT, they would handle technology, marketing. As everything says there, every department will have something to do with social media. Budget, and this excludes salary of any possible salary social media function. And I didn't give any guidelines of what should be in the budget. So, some people might say, oh, my Facebook ad comes from my social media account. Others might have it come from a general marketing account. But in general, about half didn't budget for social media. There was some larger budgets and mostly fairly small budgets. And think about what areas your budget will hit. Human resources, you'll have to pay a salary. Staff development, conferences like this. Technological needs and marketing efforts. CD giveaway costs money, so you have to put that in your budget as well. Monitoring and measuring was interesting that none of the orchestras had really specific metrics that they had implemented for measuring their results. 27% were currently thinking about it. And monitoring, most people use Google Alerts, and mostly on their own brand name, and then some others on other aspects of their organization. So those were basically the results I found, about 80% as well reported to senior staff about their social media efforts. So that's kind of the status of social media in December 2009 at orchestras around the country.
So we're all utilizing Facebook, or most of us I saw in the room, and some of us are on Twitter, and a lot of orchestras seem to be where we are. But Beth, can we get back to, again, your point of how do we take to the next level? How do we get that culture shift to create, to get it strategically beyond just a few posts here and a few monitors over there?
Great. So that has to do with what we call, described in the book as an organization has a social culture. And that's defined as using social media to engage people inside and outside the organization to improve programs, services, or reach communication goals. So not just necessarily marketing, but everyone in the organization. So how many of you have everybody in your organization having a presence on social media? Okay, what is the name of your organization?
Westmont College Orchestra.
Okay, I want to talk to you afterwards. Okay, so, but to get there, we know that that can be a slow progression. And where it begins is kind of dealing with some of the perceptions around social media. We may realize and acknowledge that it's important, but when we start to put it in practice, the monsters come out. And they need to be wrestled to the ground. And some of these may be familiar, maybe there's different ones with orchestras, but you know, the whole loss of control, dealing with negative comments, you know, what's going to happen if they criticize us? Gee, didn't people get paid to do that in the newspaper 15 years ago? And if they do it publicly, at least you know about it, because they would be doing that and telling their friends in their social circles. Addressing personality versus organizational voice, you know, trusting employees. You know, this whole difference between, do we tweet behind, you know, as the San Francisco Symphony, or do I tweet as an individual who is the director of public relations? You know, oh my God, making mistakes. You know, this stuff, you know, the web is still a teenager. You know, what is it, 1990? And social media is relatively newer. The era of the social web started in 2003, so it's not even a preteen yet. So we're still learning, we're making mistakes. So this fear of public learning and making mistakes. This one I hear in the foundation world quite a bit, and in philanthropy. It's going to make senior staff too accessible. We don't want people talking to us. Perceptions of wasted time and resources. Have you heard that? For those of you that do social media, is social media time suck? Well, or perceived time suck?
Just the iPhone.
Okay, just the iPhone. And the hierarchy of distractible tools, it's the iPhone is way at the top. And of course, this whole issue about suffering from information overload. You know, we already have too much email. How many of you don't get enough email? Okay. How many want more?
Your email.
Yeah, plus having to keep up with your Facebook and your Twitter and, you know, whatever. Okay, so all these things need to be wrestled to the ground. And what I think happens is that, how many of you watch Lost? No Lost fans. Okay, how many of you remember Attack of the Killer Tomatoes? The Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, The Blob. Okay, you know the science fiction movies when the scary monster comes on, you hear dun 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 dun, and everyone runs and screams and they're quiet and they just go in. So whenever there's a social media monster that comes out, we're quiet about it. And we need to turn that around and make it into a conversation starter and talk about it. Because that's the way for change.